Good afternoon from Helsinki. It is a overcast day here. It's not very hot for the first week of July. Last year, Helsinki saw a pretty long string of 30-degree days, which decades ago people would say would never happen. So something's in the air. But today it is, I haven't looked at the temperature. I'm guessing it's like 15, 16 degrees, which would be somewhere around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I felt a little bit of rain this morning, but I'm in this lovely study space in this library in Vuosaari, and I wanted to do another Eugenio Montale poem from the same his 1925 collection, Ossi di Seppia. And I thought of this poem. That's the whole reason that I checked out the book from the Helsinki library system, is because I was sitting on a kallio, which is these outcroppings. We're essentially on like the Baltic Shield here. So there's all these big bald outcroppings of rocks that are that you can see have been the result of the last glacial age. And there was this lovely view. You could see so far out to the sea and over the flatlands, which is most of Finland. But I looked down. There was this crack in the stone. I also I love studying these trees that grow in spirals, like they're growing in the striations on the rocks. But right where I was, there were all these ants, and a lot of them were red. And I remembered that Montale used this in his beguiling and precise and very, very precise poem, Meriggiare. He says, Meriggiare, pallido e assorto, presso un rovente muro d'orto, ascoltare tra I pruni e gli sterpi, schiocchi di merli, frusci di serpi. Nelle crepe del suolo o sulla vecchia, spiar le file di rosse formiche, che ora si rompono ed ora s'intrecciano a sommo di minuscole bicche. Osservare tra frondi e palpitare lontano di scaglie di mare, mentre si levano tremuli scricchi di ciccale dai calvi picchi. E andando nel sole che abbalia, sentire con triste meraviglia, come tutta la vita e il suo travaglio, in questo seguitare una muraglia che ha in cima cocci aguzzi di bottiglia. So I'm going to go from that to the Jonathan Galassi translation, which has a lot of problems with it, but it's pretty nice. He found a lyricism that is not in the original one, and it just brings to mind the terror of being a translator, especially for someone like Montale, where it was really by the word and these nouns and untranslatable words in some cases, including the first word, which we'll get into. But so Meriggiare starts, sit the noon out. Terrible beginning, but it gets better. Sit the noon out, pale and lost in thought, beside a blistering garden wall. Here, among the thorns and brambles, snakes rustle, blackbirds catcall. In the cracked earth or on the vetch, spy the red ants' files, now breaking up, now weaving on top of little piles. Observe between branches the far-off throb of sea scales, while cicadas' wavering screeks rise from the bald peaks. And walking in the dazzling sun, feel with sad amazement that all life and its torment consists in following along a wall with broken bottle shards embedded in the top. That one you need to read a few times to really get it, to really get the terror. It's almost even more shocking than his piece about finding the nothingness while you're on a nice little morning walk. And so this poem, one of the first things and one of the most exciting reasons to read it and to consider how difficult it is to translate into Italian is the first word, meriggiare. We have no word like that in English that I'm aware of that captures, because it's like once you know what that word means and have experienced that word and have it in your memory, it takes like, it would take like as many words as it's in the poem to adequately describe what that one word means in English. And it's a simple word, but it's so specific. As he put it, sit the noon out, which is kind of what it is. It's just the midday rest that you would take on an intense summer day, like they're having now in Italy, not here in Finland, but and that's the tradition of the everyone knows siesta or riposo in Italiano, pisolino, penicchele, and it's it has smart origins because if you were working in the summer, you'd want to work in the morning and then you take a break at noon, have some pranzo, take a nap during the most intense heat of the day. I mean, it just makes sense, right? And so they call this meriggiare, which comes from the Latin meridianus, just middle of the day, rest, right? But it's, and I think it's kind of an ancient word, not used too much today. I hear pisolino a lot, or riposo in the north, and but meriggiare carries through this association, and being a verb, it also changes the whole character of that line. Meriggiare, pallido e assorto. And so it's like you'd have to say, in the heat of the day in Liguria after a morning of activity and working, I came in and I was in the loggia, and I took a little repose, and I conserved my strength for what I have to do the rest of the day after I enjoyed this little respite from the intense heat and the sun and all this stuff. It was like like so much is contained in just that one word, and it's a beautiful chunky word. But it, like, even just saying to rest at noon, he was just like, I'm taking a noon rest. It's like, yeah, but it sounds like it doesn't sound like part of deep culture and tradition when you say it that way. It's just like, I had to get up early because I had to do all this stuff, and I was running to and fro, and I was, and and then I got tired and took a rest. But no, this is more like it's part of culture. It's part of, what people did to maximize their energy and also to enjoy life and to recuperate and take care of yourself and all those type of things. So anyway, we just got by one word, but it also, and this is at least amuses me, is like when I was starting to get where I could speak Italian in most situations, except for abstract things, or highly technical things. I just didn't have vocabulary. but you know, I was living in Milano for many months, and I would note that people switched from buongiorno, the most common greeting that's known by a lot of non-Italian speakers, buongiorno, um, which is, you know, said in the morning. But then, like, when do you switch to buonasera? And I felt, and I kept laughing at this, and it was a way for me to engage in further conversation with just people you would see at a shop or a restaurant or the bookstore or whatever. Is why do you say buonasera at like 11:30 a.m.? You know, I thought that was still in the buongiorno time, and so I developed this whole thing about the cutoff times from buongiorno, you know, good day, good morning, whatever, to buonasera, which is supposed to be evening, or at least if you learn Italian like I did. I started learning formally in college, and you know, one of the first lessons are, you know, buongiorno, buonasera, but then they I don't know why they throw this in there. They always say buon pomeriggio. Pomeriggio is just afternoon. Like it has the same root as meriggiare from the poem, is resting at noon. It's like post meridiem. It's like after midday, pomeriggio. So I've never understood that, why they teach you that when you're trying to learn Italian, like in America or somewhere, and they say that there's this thing called buon pomeriggio, which nobody in Italy has ever said it. So I've used it to comedic effect numerous times. Like I walked into this one store, they kind of knew me. I knew, you know, I had at least seen or talked to them a couple times, and they said buonasera at like noon, and I'm like, it was like I didn't realize it was already noon at that point, and so I like looked at the time and I said buon pomeriggio, and it's like we've skipped right from the morning greeting buongiorno to sera. They usually just say sera, and so it was like every interaction I would have during like the midday hours, I would be completely in panic mode, because I'd be like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say sera or buongiorno. And so sometimes I would just say salve. Like I had this ongoing, really fun interaction with one of my neighbors in this lovely palazzo I lived in Milano for a time. And he lived alone. He had a small dog. I'd see him taking the dog for a walk. I ran into them once at the gelato shop. There were of course multiple gelato shops nearby, but there was one that everyone knew was the best. It was clearly the best. And so it was a tiny space, very, very narrow, and not many people could be inside at one time. So there were always big clusters of people outside, either they're enjoying their gelato or waiting to get in, because there could only have like 5 or 6 people in the shop at one time. And I saw him and his dog, and we had this wonderful conversation. And one day, I was walking down the stairs, and I saw him. He was waiting for the elevator, and I look at my phone, and it was 3 o'clock, and I'm like, I don't know, you know, this guy, he's about in his 70s. I don't know if if he's going to be a buongiorno, like when his buongiorno cutoff time is. That was my joke. It's a buongiorno cutoff time. And so I said salve, and he said buongiorno, and I said, oh, thank. I was like, this is fantastic. You're like the only person in Milan who says buongiorno after like 11 a.m., which is also the cappuccino cutoff time. I think that's more well known than the buongiorno cutoff time, is that you never have coffee with milk after 11, right after 11. But I want to get back to the poem. I've rambled on, but I think it's so interesting how, you know, Galassi made a very interesting poem out of the same material of Montale's words, but like just that first word carries with it so much meaning in Italian that it just, if you're trying to summarize it in a couple words to somebody who doesn't know the significance and the culture behind that word, it loses so much of its impact. But it changes the tone. It really changes the tone. And so also, I just wanted to just briefly, I'll do the last stanza again. And walking in the dazzling sun, e andando nel sole che abbaglia. And walking in the dazzling sun, feel with sad amazement that all life and its torment consists in following along a wall with broken bottle shards embedded in the top. It's like the supreme economy in which he did that. Che ha in cima cocci aguzzi di bottiglia. It's so terrifying because it's like the first stanzas are all about this. I mean, the mood is kind of languid and uncertain, but there's also a comfort and security in it, and there's a culture to it. It's more like hiding out from the most intense period of the day in summer, and there's like these little notices of all the different animals going about their thing, and then you get to the last where it's those broken bottle shards and the top of the wall, which for me, in my mind, I can picture them having taken many, many long walks in Toscana and in Piemonte and in Lombardia. Like, you do see that they had this tradition of putting broken glass at the top of these masonry fences, right? For obvious reasons. But it also reminded me of where I really noticed just intense engineering and thought behind how to make a better fence, which of course was in Cape Town, South Africa. I spent 2 periods of time in, and I stayed at one place that had it's near it's kind of in you're on the ascent up to Table Mountain in this I forget the name of the neighborhood, but it's an old established neighborhood with beautiful houses, and there's a fence, and they had the razor wire and the bottle shards embedded in the top, and they have all kinds of other, I'm not going to go into all the details, but they've thought through all of the things you can do to make a fence even more secure. We're not talking about Robert Frost's fence. I don't know if they had bottle shards broken up in the top of those, but it makes you think about that, and it makes you think about our inheritance, just as we think of ourselves in just the most basic form in our common humanity, and then how things in this beautiful earth we live in, with all these beautiful things, cultural things, natural things, with all the other creatures and all the landscapes and all the inherited beauty of our culture, but we're walking along a fence that has bottle shards embedded in the top. And so it's like it's that constant reminder. It's like, what is this life? Why does there have to be so much struggle and strife, and why do things have to be as difficult? Like, what's really behind that? And once you start going down those rabbit holes, if you want to call it that, I don't know where you're going to lead, but I've been in a lot of personal transformation in the last couple of years, in terms of finally pushing through some childhood things and family history things, and looking kind of unflinchingly at what this life is, and I feel very deeply what he says here. But I know that what's amazing is when you stop, when you let all those things go, when you untie all those knots, when you really look at them in the face in kind of not in a dispassionate way, I'm not going to say, but I'm going to say that, but you go to the heart of things. And it's like, and you think, this is horrible, this is dark, this is, why would anyone do that? Why, you understand why people get into addiction and numbing and whatever the latest trendy, cure or amusement is. And to get away from that, denial ain't just a river in Egypt, as the cliche goes. But that there comes a point where you push, and then there's all this release and clarity that comes out that you just have to trust is going to be there, but you don't know that it's going to be there. I'm going to read it again in English. I like Galassi's translation. It's just that it feels like in some ways a very different poem until you get to that last line where Montale did such a beautiful job. Che ha in cima cocci aguzzi di bottiglia. Anyway, Galassi says, sit the noon out, pale and lost in thought, beside a blistering garden wall. Here, among the thorns and brambles, snakes rustle, blackbirds catcall. In the cracked earth or on the vetch, spy the red ants' files, now breaking up, now weaving on top of little piles. Observe between branches the far-off throb of sea scales, while the cicadas' wavering screeks rise from the bald peaks, and walking in the dazzling sun, feel with sad amazement that all life and its torment consists in following along a wall with broken bottle shards embedded in the top. It was funny, like even though it sounds kind of silly and self-indulgent, the reason what brought me to this poem, and I hadn't read it in so many years, was the particular animals mentioned, the blackbirds. I've been seeing so many blackbirds lately, and I am kicking myself that I didn't have my a camera ready. We always have devices on us that can record and stuff. I was walking through the cemetery. There's this huge cemetery near where I live, and everyone walks through it. It's lovely. It's absolutely lovely. The different tree-lined pathways, and it's wonderfully taken care of in landscape. And it's the quickest way to get, if you're on a long walk, to get to the nature reserves and other places. So I'm constantly going through cemetery, and they all have these little silver poles with the numbers of each block, I guess is the official term. And I was walking one evening. I had spent a day reading out on top of one of these rock outcroppings in the nature reserve, and I had to walk back through the cemetery. And I just out of the corner of my eye, I see this blackbird. And the blackbird is perched right above the number 14. And I think, oh my God, this is so uncanny. One of my favorite writers, poets, is Wallace Stevens, and one of his, it's not my favorite of his poems, but I deeply appreciate it, is 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. And I see this blackbird like right on the 14. I was like, I got to take a picture of this. This is the 14th way. Like, this is, in my ego, I'm thinking, oh, Wallace Stevens is communicating to me through this blackbird on the number 14, the 14th way of looking at a blackbird. But anyway, so I had the red ants, and then I had the blackbirds, and then I remembered that this also has, the deeply mythological and historic, the multiple historical allusions to cicadas. Everyone loves talking about cicadas. I think that's how they say it in most places in Americas. But in Italian, there are a lot of I'm not going to go into all the cicada lore in Italy or Finland. You can read it if you're interested. It's fascinating. But cicale, as he says in the poem, he says the cicada's wavering scricchi, the tremuli scricchi di cicale. And cicala is a beautiful way of saying cicada. It's onomatopoeia, right? And I was at a wine tasting that's right, it was in Doliani, one of the comuni in Barolo. And this one small winery, excellent winemaker, one of their premier bottlings is named after the cicada and has cicada on this lovely, I guess, kind of like a wood cutting style cicada on the label. And the woman who was leading the tasting, we're having this great conversation, and then I asked her a little bit more about the etiquette, the label designs and stuff, and we were drinking the Cicala, and she asked me, just all of a sudden it occurred to her that she didn't know what Cicala is in English. And she asks me, and I was just like, I hesitate because we were having this wonderful conversation. I'm just like, I don't want to say it. And I was like, I had to think about, like, how do they say it in the South? I actually there was a really good play written by someone, I think, from Mississippi. It was a contemporary play maybe 20 years ago when I was living in Memphis. And it was called Cicada. So I finally said to her, yeah, they say cicada. I was trying to pronounce it as American as I could. It's like, and she was so disappointed, and I knew it would disappoint her because I think that she thought that perhaps it would be an entirely different word in English. And it turns out it's just a bad pronunciation that's very similar to the Italian, which is beautiful, cicala, and it's like, oh, it's cicada, and like I remember that moment so well because like she really wanted to know, like she didn't know what it could. It might be something completely different. It might start with a different letter. It might have a whole different word origin or history. And it's like, no, it's cicada. But anyway, I'm just going to end with that. And walking in the dazzling sun, feel with sad amazement that all life and its torment consists in following along a wall with broken bottle shards embedded in the top. Meriggiare by Eugenio Montale. I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. And the sun just came out. I thought it was going to be really cloudy all day. But alas, it looks like our long evening and white night here in Helsinki might be bright and lovely. And I'm going to go take a long walk. Hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you.